I'm here.
Thank you. Okay, Your Worship, it's 7 o'clock.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'll bring this regular council meeting to order Monday, May the 4th, 2020 at 7 p.m. And the next order of business, please.
Yes, Your Worship. We would like to get started. Good evening, everyone. We will be holding this evening's meeting via telephone conference. We will start with a roll call for members of the public. And when I call your name, please verbally indicate if you are present. Mayor Facio?
Present.
Councillor Piper?
Present.
Councillor Vidal?
Present.
Councillor Palmer?
Present.
And Councillor Hooper?
Present.
Thank you. And Adam joined us as well. For the purpose of this meeting, I'd also like to introduce members of the staff that are here this evening. The CAO, Madeline McDonald, our Financial Officer, Tracy Jones, Community Services Coordinator, Rhonda Schell, and myself, Deborah Key, the Corporate Officer. And as I said before, Adam Lewis is here from the Agassiz-Harrison Observer. For the reports of council, Mayor Facio will ask if there is a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. And when that happens, please state your name when you're moving or seconding any motion. Once a matter is on the table for discussion, Mayor Facio will address each member of the council on a rotating basis for any comment on the matter. He may also ask staff for further input. The mayor will then ask council members again on a rotational basis if there is any further discussion. Hearing none, the mayor will call the question on the motion, asking if there are any opposed. For meetings held electronically, only opposition votes will be announced. So if you oppose the motion, please state your name. Thank you. And we'll move on to the next item, Your Worship, introduction of late items.
Any late items? None being?
Thank you. Could I have approval of the agenda then, please?
Approval of the agenda moved by Councillor
I will move it, Your Worship. Councillor
White,
Vidal.
seconded by Councillor Palmer. Call the question. All in favour? Anybody opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to the adoption of council minutes. We have the regular council meeting minutes of April 20th, 2020 here for adoption. Before I'd call that, Your Worship, I'd like to draw your attention to the minutes. I inadvertently left off Rhonda Schell and Tyson Cook from the attendance. So those would be as amended.
Thank you. Need a mover and a second of adoption of the minutes. Moved. Palmer. Moved by Palmer.
Vidal.
Seconded by Vidal. Any errors or omissions? None being. Call the question. Anybody opposed? Passes.
Thank you. We'll move on to number 5, business arising from the minutes.
Any business from council arising from the minutes? Carry on, please.
Thank you. We'll move right on through number 6 and number 7, Your Worship. There is nothing on the consent agenda, nor do we have any delegations this evening. So we'll move on to number 8 under correspondence. We have a letter dated April 22nd, 2020 from the Harrison Agassiz Chamber of Commerce regarding COVID-19 situation. We also have a letter dated April 24th, 2020 from Tourism Harrison regarding Tourism Harrison funding and events. And we also have an email dated April 28th, 2020 from Blue Dandelion Gifts regarding time-limited pay parking. All of the correspondence are here for receipt, Your Worship.
Have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Hooper, seconded by
Piper.
Piper. Call the question. Anybody opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll move on to number 9. Is there any business arising from this correspondence?
Any business from council arising from the correspondence? I'd just like to ask one question to the CAO. Is there any action required on the tourism letter at all, Madeline?
No, Your Worship.
Oh, okay.
It's there for information, and it's in line with the financial forecast that we presented to council at the last council meeting.
Thank you. Next order of business, please.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to number 10, reports of councillors, committees, committee of the whole and commissions.
Councillor Hooper, please.
Thank you. April 22nd, took part in a telephone conference with the CNIB, the Canadian Institute for the Blind, on the effects of self-isolation is having on their members and how to help. Part of Agassiz Harris's Community Services. 23rd of April, took part in a telephone conference with the members of CRN, the Citizens Response Network, on the increased elder, spouse and child abuse during COVID-19's pandemic restrictions. Again, part of Agassiz Harrison Healthy Communities. 28th of April, took part in a telephone conference with Flo on the effects of self-isolation on the youth, part of the Foundry and Agassiz Harrison Healthy Communities. 30th of April, attended a webinar run by GovLaw, which dealt with various items, including the failure of the City of Vancouver on their plastics ban. May the 1st, took part in the telephone conference special meeting on the community to community, and the main subject of conversation was the Lower Fraser flood management planning. And on Saturday, May the 2nd, I took part in a Zoom conference held by Lindsay Lewis, the prospective candidate for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. Thank you.
Your Worship? Your Worship? Are you going to call on Councillor Palmer? Your Worship?
I think we lost him.
Oh. Okay, if council will give us a minute, we'll try and get him reconnected.
Hello?
Oh, Your Worship, is that you?
Yes, sorry, I lost you there for the technical problems. I'm back on again.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Hooper had...
My apologies, Councillor Hooper.
Okay. Thank you. He's completed his report. Did you want to move on to Councillor Palmer?
Yes, please, Councillor Palmer.
I believe that since our last meeting, I've had a Fraser Valley Regional Library Board meeting, and nothing else on my agenda or on my list of items has come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Your Worship. Since our last council meeting on April 21st, I attended the chamber meeting, and on May 1st, I attended the C2C special meeting. Thank you. End of my report.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bible.
Thank you, Your Worship. On Thursday, April 30th, I attended a webinar on local government case law updates that was hosted by the Dominion GovLaw firm. And on Friday, May 1st, I also attended the Zoom meeting with our Leftmont community group. And the main focus of discussion was flood management planning and strategies. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Councillor. Next order of business, please.
Yes, Your Worship, if you wouldn't mind just speaking up a little bit more.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to number 11 and read that's reports from the mayor.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to recognize that today is 4th of May, is the liberation of Holland 75 years ago, where unfortunately 7,600 Canadian soldiers lost their lives. And every year it's a tremendous celebration they have in Holland to acknowledge the liberation by the Canadian forces and other allied forces. Just to recognize that, unfortunately, there was going to be a ceremony, as you all know, very well know, but the Legion had to cancel that due to the pandemic. The other is I'd like to have a letter of congratulations sent to the new Chief of Seabird Island, Jim Harris, and also a letter of thanking former Chief Clint Seymour for all these years of service to his own and to both our Kent and Harrison communities for the great job he's done and service. Can that be taken care of, please, staff?
Yes, Your Worship will take care of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Where are we? At the Fraser Valley Regional District conference meeting last week, the sub-regional regulation amendment bylaw was put up for a recommendation. They're going to be, due to this COVID pandemic, and they're going to be what's the word I'm trying to find here? That the original to provide relief from penalty charges for outstanding 2020 dog licenses. The proposed bylaw amendment will remove the requirement charge of 25% late penalty to dog owners who have not yet renewed their dog license for 2020. So that was slight relief there for those who are not being able to pay for their dog licenses. At the Fraser Valley Regional District, BC Transit is still carrying on with normal service, but the trips are down 50 to 60% on all routes. They are now looking at, or they're doing now, re-entry from the rear door with a red line that you cannot pass to get it closer to the driver. And planning is still moving ahead for the expansion of the service in 2021-22. At the Let's C2C meeting, there was an update by the PET coordinator, Mike Van Lahoven, regarding the scenarios that could happen with the high snowpacks this year. Could be the 5th highest on record, and they vary from 116 in the Fraser Valley to 150 up country, the snowpacks. They reckon there could be 8,000 to 11,000 litres per second at Hope. And the middle of May is looking to be very warm for places up country. So we're going to, looks like we're going to be on flood watch here. Approximately 9,000 sandbags have been allocated for Harrison. And of course, there has to be some way of looking at social distancing to try and fill these bags so we have them in preparation ahead of time. And the next meeting is on May the 11th at 1 p.m. I think that's all. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll move on to number 12, reports from staff. And this is a report from the Community Services Coordinator regarding pay parking program.
Michelle, it's all yours.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, everybody. This report is regarding the 2020 pay parking season. Because the village parks and beaches are currently closed to visitors due to the COVID-19 pandemic, consideration needs to be given to the upcoming pay parking season. The village has an agreement with Precise Park Link currently, but there is a provision for either party to cancel at any time with 30 days notice. At this time, council has the opportunity to cancel, modify, or suspend the pay parking program until 2021. In speaking with Precise Park Link, they did give us some options of models that could encourage vehicle turnover. One option could be an escalating rate where it would start at a base rate for the first hour and each hour thereafter is priced increasingly higher to a maximum total. The other option could be time limited where purchases from the machine are set at a maximum time limit versus the full day that we have now. The reason for vehicle turnover would be to discourage people from leaving their vehicles in front of businesses all day while they're not participating in commercial activities. As we received in the letters earlier, stakeholders in the business sector, including Tourism Harrison and the Harrison Agassiz Chamber of Commerce, have been consulted, and their wish is to have the pay parking suspended for 2020 as a goodwill gesture to encourage visitors to return to the village. However, some business operators are not in agreement with that approach and have shared their desire to see stricter parking management in the downtown commercial area. And that was also received in the letters. The financial implications of suspending the pay parking season would be an approximate loss of $173,000. Of course, these figures are based on historical data, and they may not reflect the anticipated revenue of the 2020 season, which just can't be predicted under these current circumstances. So there's 3 options in the recommendations. Option 1 is that the agreement with Precise Park Link be canceled effective immediately and that the pay parking program be suspended until 2021. Option 2 is that the agreement with Precise Park Link remain as status quo, or option 3, that the agreement with Precise Park Link be modified by changing to an escalating rate of $2 for the first hour, $3 for the second hour, and $5 for the third hour to a maximum of 3 hours. Thank you.
So we have 3 recommendations. Would the councillor like a mover and a seconder on a chosen recommendation, please?
One of the options, Your Worship.
Yes.
Okay.
One of the options. Is there a mover or seconder on one of the options?
When you say, Councillor Hooper, when you say one of the options, we've got no option of actually putting our own motion on the table, I take it.
Yeah, you've got a choice of 3 options here, recommendations. So I'm asking, do you want to recommend option 1, 2, or 3?
So we can't put our own motion on the table.
No, this is the options that's been, that can be done if these options fail.
Right, I'll go for option 2 then, please.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? No seconder?
It failed, Your Worship.
I'll call it again. Is there a seconder? None being, it fails. Is there another recommendation for option 2 or 3?
1 or 2.
Your Worship, I would move for option number 3.
Thank you. Is there a seconder, please? Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Second, Councillor Hooper. Now, discussion, we'll start with Councillor Bible.
Thank you, Your Worship. I previously had the view that our paid parking should have been suspended for 2020. However, I've rethought it and do now support implementing our paid parking with option 3 for a couple of reasons. Although we can't predict the gross revenue for 2020, the estimated expenses of $39,000 versus, partially the village receiving some net revenue. In other words, it's maybe some is better than nothing. I now feel that if we suspend our paid parking program, one of my concerns is the possibility of perhaps employees and perhaps even some owners of businesses taking advantage of unlimited free parking that would restrict the number of available parking stalls for visitors and residents. free. I don't know that that increment amount of parking cost would be difficult to manage or not. Perhaps we could look at just a flat hourly rate up to 3 hours. Those are my thoughts, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, I mean, option 3, if it's all the days are going to be $8 for 3 hours, you're going to do away with all day visitors, because they're not going to pay $8 for 3 hours or $16 for 6 hours if they move back from one day to the other. If this was to be just $2 per hour for a maximum of 3 hours, making it $6 for the 3 hours, I'd be happy with that. But it's a bit restrictive. I mean, none of these options are really that brilliant. And either we don't have any paid parking at all, or we have to find $178,000 to go into our general revenue fund, or we stay as we are, which is really no good for the businesses, because people are parking in front of their area all day long, or we raise it so much that we don't want any day visitors here whatsoever. That's my opinion on all 3 options.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
This goes to one of the fundamental problems I've always had with being on council, is that we have to vote on the motions put before us without the ability to custom make the motion we might feel more comfortable with. So if I had to pick one of the 3, I would leave it status quo, but I'm not happy with the status quo. So I find it very awkward. So I'm going to vote against this motion. The way I look at it, initially I wasn't that opposed to free parking this year, but then I realized that free parking is in fact free parking, and it's not about the money issue, although of course we need a positive revenue from it. But where there is no cost, well then there's no limitations on parking. And I look at Harrison Hot Springs Road to the west, and I see not many parking spots, and parking spots that easily get filled, because I've had friends in years, half a dozen years ago, where they would stay at the Harrison Beach Hotel and be told that they could pay for parking or park on the streets for free. So I really believe if we charge nothing, we're going to find that there's no movement of parking down there, which is quite unfair to the businesses and the restaurants down there. So free parking is something that I've considered, and it just doesn't work. The proposal put forward by Ms. Baldwin is not unreasonable, but it's one of those things where you do a proposal to solve a problem, but it creates other problems. So having effectively her proposal that we're looking at is 3-hour limited parking. And there's no way that I can agree to 3-hour limited parking throughout the entire beach. That is too limiting, and we do have people that stay longer than 3 hours. And those people are, even though they may be staying on the beach while they barbecue for the day, they are potential customers of some of the businesses that don't serve $30 meals, but serve coffees and ice creams and chocolates and all of those sorts of things. So it seems to me the problem is trying to fit a solution that deals with 2 separate problems. If I were picking my choices, I would have agreed to the proposal for the 3 hours for the sites west of Hot Springs Road and properly signing it so people know they can only get 3 hours down there. I'm not quite so sure I would go escalate the price quite so much in the 3rd hour. And then I would make everything east of Hot Springs Road, I would make it the same price as it is now. So there would still be a cost, but it would allow people to buy an all-day parking pass and be there, because there's much less businesses there. And particularly if we're saying that we're going to put the barbecue possibilities at that end of the park, or at that end of the beach, then clearly allowing people to be able to buy longer-term parking makes more sense to me. Now, I know that just because we create 3-hour parking, it doesn't mean that it's going to eliminate all people who come for the day, because they'll park on Eagle and Lillooet and such that they do. But I do think if I could put a motion forward, I would have moved to go 3-hour parking for the section west of Hot Springs Road, and with not quite those rates, but maybe 2, 3, and 4 for the cost for the day, for the 3-hour and the 3-hour limit. But I would have gone with from Hot Springs to the west. I would have left it exactly as it is. I don't think this is a year to be increasing costs, and I think the proposal to go to 3 hours at where we effectively would earn $10 over 3 hours and then make people leave, I think that will be increasing the cost, and I don't think that's the year for that. This is the year for that. So I'm going to vote against the motion, but I thought I would at least elaborate why, and certainly I would like some sort of a hybrid that isn't possible apparently to put forward as a motion until everything else fails. Thank you.
Yeah, well, you can always make an amendment to the motion, Councillor.
So you think I should make an amendment as opposed to just waiting for it to fail and then, okay.
I'm just going to verify that with the corporate officer. Am I correct?
Yes, Your Worship, or if Councillor Palmer wants to, he can make a standalone motion.
Well, I'm fine with whatever would bring it forward. So maybe that's a good way. I would move that from that Harrison Hot Springs Road west be in fact 3-hour limited parking at the rate of $2 the first hour. I guess I'm not sure if I'm moving it so far along. It's not an amendment. 2, 3, and 4 would be the rates for those 3 hours, and that everything east would be on the status quo, where someone can park for the entire day.
Now, maybe you should clarify that, Councillor. When you say east, would you say east of the Memorial Hall?
No, when I'm saying that, I'm saying east of Hot Springs Road. So the divider line for me is
the pool.
where the police vehicle spots are. So from the electric spot to the east would be where I would allow status quo, and to the west I would go with the Baldwin proposal, which would be for 3 hours, but I would change the third hour to $4 rather than 5.
Okay, is there a seconder to that amendment?
Yeah, I'll second that because it's exactly what I emailed all the councillors on the 28th of April and got no response for.
Okay, thank you. Is there any, I should get some discussion on the amendment, so I'll start with Councillor Piper.
Yeah, I don't support anything that's been said so far. I spoke with the chamber executive who represents the local business members, and it was distinctly clear their request to suspend paid parking for at least this year as a way to show support for our struggling local business community. And quite frankly, I tend to agree and believe it would be greedy for us to reach into the pockets of our visitors and locals after everyone has been dealing with and will deal with the fallout of the pandemic. We've been telling people not to come, and when it's safe to do so, we'll gladly welcome them all back. And knowing that tourism is going to suffer as a result of this pandemic much longer than any other sector, wouldn't removing the parking fees for one season assist greatly with that next phase of welcoming people back to the waterfront? Our businesses desperately need our help. So I do not support the amendment. I do not support option 2 or 3, and I can only stand behind option 1.
Thank you. I'll go round to Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. I've been listening to the discussion. I think it would be confusing to, and this is, just my opinion, with, limited escalating parking on one part of Esplanade and not on the other. my feeling is that whatever we do, it should be applied universally along all of Esplanade. There are businesses and restaurants on the east side, although not as many as Councillor Palmer indicated than on the west side. My train of thinking also was with the installation of the new barbecue picnic tables and barbecue stands on the east end, putting in a limited hourly parking would allow those people and visitors and residents who wished to utilize the new picnic tables and barbecue stands. It would allow them the opportunity to unload whatever and set up at that picnic table, and then the ability to move their vehicles. And I'm gonna also suggest at this time that we do have free parking at the overflow parking. So I can envision people having the opportunity to unload for limited parking at one of the stalls and then parking a vehicle in the overflow parking lot. Although perhaps we should look at changing the signage a little bit at the overflow parking. I find it confusing and maybe changing the signage to indicate, free parking from a certain time, I don't know, 8 in the morning till 10 at night or something like that. So those are my thoughts, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Hoovey, any further comments on this one? The amendment?
Yeah, I'll keep short and sweet. We've got the three options on the table. We either have...
We're discussing the amendment at the moment.
The amendment. Well, the amendment would have been easier to discuss if everybody had replied to my original email on the 28th of April. The only person to reply on that was the CAO, because these are virtually the same conditions that I put down. Now, having done paid parking 30-odd years back in London, I can tell you it will work well with the limited parking base, the time restricted. So therefore, yes, I support the motion.
You support the amendment?
The amendment, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer, you have any further comments on this?
I did want to address it one further time. I find this always a very difficult issue. My experience, of course, I've got experience in parking, not from downtown Harrison, quite truthfully, but from my experience with downtown Abbotsford and being president of the Downtown Business Association for many, many years. And I know that free parking was one of the worst things we could have, because it allowed employees and everyone to jam up, and many of the merchants suffered from their customers not being able to access them. So I'm not, although of course, from a Harrison Village point of view, I want the revenue, but I can't say that that's really the driving argument that I have. I'm simply concerned about organizing parking in a way that's fair, and I am worried that if we make it free, that even though our downtown might not be busy this year, unfortunately, because of COVID, that we may find that some businesses are harmed by no parking turnover. And so I think that I just want to make the point, I don't think this is an effort to in any way be unhelpful to businesses. My main motivation is thinking that it is helpful. And of course, I don't know, I know the Chamber has views. I've always been a member of the Chamber in different communities, and I've not always supported the view of Chamber. So I know they don't always represent all their members. They represent the number of people who show up to meetings, and not all businesses are members. So I do respect the view of the Chamber. I also respect that Ms. Baldwin has got 3 or 4 people signing, which again is not representative of the majority of businesses. But I do see a very distinctly different situation on the west side of Esplanade, simply because those hotels can so easily take the parking spots if they're free. And if I were staying at the resort and I was told that I could, I'm going to have to pay $20 or $30 for a parking spot, or even 15, I certainly am cheap enough that I would park in the parking spot. So I'm just worried that it's not helpful for the businesses to go free. Otherwise, I would be supportive of that. So I just thought I would kind of reiterate my support for my own amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Worship?
Councillor,
Your Worship?
Councillor, yes?
The CAO would like a few words, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, certainly. Madeline?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I just wanted to provide a little bit of background information on the hourly rate. The proposed amendment references the 2, 3, and 4 as an amendment to the 2, 3, and 5, with $2 an hour being for the first hour. If that was to stand for part of the community and the other community would be status quo is $3 an hour. So that would be an additional complication that should probably get ironed out. I'm just not sure that council has all that information in front of them. And I should also make comment that the $2 an hour for the first hour is really reflective of a lot of the complaints that we got from businesses on the east end, coffee shop type of places, wherein people were wanting to come and get their coffees and not pay an exorbitant amount for parking, but just maybe come, stand in line, get their coffee, hang out. They don't mind paying something, but they don't want to pay too much. So that's why that first hour was discounted. Thank you.
Councillor Hooper, could I just make one last point?
Hang on, did the CAO finish?
Yes.
Yes, Your Worship, she is.
Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Hooper.
With this amendment, if we include the St Alice and that little short section of Hot Spring Road, it will make it easier for precise parking to control and less confusing to the tourists. Because if they're left out of this, they're not going to know how much money to put in the meters. So including this, if Councillor Palmer would like to change his motion to include St Alice and Hot Springs Road, it would make it a lot easier for precise parking to actually maintain this.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer, do you have any comments?
Yeah, that was actually my intent. So that's a lack of precision on my part. So certainly I would agree with Councillor Hooper that would be the appropriate amendment.
So that be including the small, short portion of Hot Springs Road where the pool is, as well.
Yes.
Thank you. And I'll finish off with Councillor Piper. Do you have any further comments other than what you've already said?
Yeah, no, I've got a few comments and a question for staff. So the comment regarding the parking lot in behind the village hall, that we should change the signage. I know when I spoke with Ms. Baldwin, she raised that as well as a concern. However, it's not always free parking there, so adding additional signage or changing the cost of signage and all of that would blur that messaging, because there are service groups that when there are events or what have you, take over, and it's either by donation or a set rate. So it's not always free parking there. And I think, I have a deep understanding of driver behavior because of my profession, but I think it might be naive on our behalf to believe that most people will drop, unpack, leave, go park somewhere else, and then come and enjoy the beach. So I can't stand behind that. But I do have a question for staff. Is there a cost commitment to the contractor and any other expenses involved with rolling out the parking for the remainder of the 2020 season?
Are you prepared to accept it?
Madeline, or want to speak to that?
Your Worship, through you. At this point, if pay parking doesn't go ahead, there is no additional costs, in our opinion.
And if it does go
Well, that would depend on the option.
So we have no figure that it's going to cost the village if we impose parking. So we just pay a percentage of the revenue brought in. There's no other
Well,
attached. Is that correct?
there is a fee per machine to be reprogrammed. I believe it's approximately $150. And we would also have to invest in some signage in the different sectors, advising people what the costs are and that there is a difference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. This is to the CAO. Now, with the COVID-19 and social distances, how will that affect the vacant lot behind the village office?
Your Worship, that really is up to the discretion of council. As you're aware, currently we've closed off the overflow parking as part of our overall campaign to discourage non-essential travel. So if there was a desire at the council table to sort of throttle the number of visitors that could come, those parking spaces could remain unavailable, but it would probably just have the net effect of pushing people out into the residential areas. So staff is quite prepared to resurrect the signage and move the no-post barriers when we're open for visitors again.
Thank you. Okay, so we've had a good discussion on, this is on the amendment now, in regards to the west and the east, regarding paid parking. I noticed on the list that we received, there was at least 6 businesses that signed the petition. That's on Esplanade, of course, and we haven't heard from 2 other businesses as of yet, or have we, CAO? Have we heard any from the other 2 businesses at the far east of Esplanade?
Did you do that?
Yes, I did talk to both businesses on the far east of Esplanade. Both of them have mentioned that their businesses rely heavily on day tripper traffic, and turnover would be appreciated, but also they did express both that they understand that it's important for the village to gain revenue from the paid parking program, but they believe that their businesses would benefit from a reduced rate as well, with making it easier for the day trippers to stop in quickly and move on. The $2 rate.
Okay, so I'll just ask the corporate officer to read out the amendment again, please.
Yes, Your Worship. So moved by Councillor Palmer, seconded by Councillor Hooper, that the agreement with Precise Park Link Inc. be modified by changing to an escalated rate of $2 for the first hour, $3 for the second hour, and $4 for the third hour to a maximum of 3 hours. That is west of Hot Springs Road at Esplanade, and east from Hot Springs Road on Esplanade remains status quo, including St. Alice.
No. Including, not
Wasn't
St. Alice, it's
No,
Hot
Maple.
Springs Road, I believe.
I thought he was talking about St. Alice.
No. Hot Springs Road.
Your Worship, this is the CAO. If I might provide clarification, I think the understanding was, as read by the corporate officer, but that the Western graduated rate of $2, $3, and $4 includes St. Alice and Hot Springs Road. Yes.
That includes that.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry, Your Worship.
And I'll let the corporate officer continue with the Hot Springs Road East and those side roads.
That's right. Okay, and now we've had a good discussion twice around the table. So on the amendment, I'm going to call the question of those opposed.
Piper opposed.
Councillor Piper opposed. So the amendment passes.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
And, sorry?
Did you have anything,
Hello?
or are you free to move? Are we free to move on?
We're free to move on, yes.
Okay, thank you. So we'll,
We need to vote on the motion itself now.
those were options available to council. The option number 2 was, had failed. Option number 3 had failed, but there was an amendment to it. Option 2 is status quo, so there's no necessity to read that motion. Yes, option 3 is amended. If you wanted to vote, if you wanted to vote on option 1, it's there, but I don't get a sense that council was considering.
I thought that we voted on the amendment, so I thought we would then have to vote on a voting and voting the motion itself, but it's fine, it's fine.
So, thank you. Next order of business, please.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next report. That's of the Community Services Coordinator regarding the Resort Development Strategy Amendment.
Carry on, Rhonda.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report is to amend the resort development strategy due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The RDS included the projects for the public art and lagoon redevelopment, but as the financial officer reported at the last meeting, these projects were going to be postponed, and because this funding for this year is undetermined. However, the COVID-19 pandemic has created some new needs, such as some signage. So if businesses are to reopen, we would want to make sure that our waterfront is safe as possible with some physical distancing and safety reminders. So with this in mind, the Sasquatch themed visitor-friendly signage will be created and installed in high-traffic public places to encourage people to continue to take precautions while visiting and follow all provincial health orders. And there are a couple of signage concepts attached, one both for physical distancing and one for the barbecue and tent changes that were recently made in the parks bylaw. The recommendation is that staff be authorized to seek provincial approval to amend the 2019 to 2021 resort development strategy by reducing the public art project by as much as $10,000 and creating a COVID-19 tourism signage project of up to $10,000. Thank you.
So we have a recommendation. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Move, Councillor. I think Councillor Vine will move, and that's seconded by Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, seconded.
Thank you. Now we start the discussion from Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Worship. I don't stand in support of staff's recommendation, as I have not been in support of the restricted tent project as well as the costly barbecue location. So, in good conscience, I can't now support a $10,000 fine project to a community. So, I'm not in favor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer.
I'm supportive of it. Hopefully, in that $10,000, we can find some, create some signage. We'll also clearly establish the differentiation in the parking rate that we just approved along Esplanade. But yes, I'm supportive of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. I mean, the memo we got here, or the recommendation, is just for the distance signage in. Is it also for the barbecue stands and the tents?
Yes, for both signs.
Right. How many signs are we actually talking about?
We have not created a full budget with a breakdown cost, but we would have enough to cover the waterfront, and it would depend on the material that we choose as to how many signs we can make.
Right.
amount was that had been budgeted for the public art project?
The original amount was $200,000.
All right, so all we're doing is reducing only $10,000 of that original amount, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, thank you. And with that, Your Worship, I do support the motion.
Okay, I'm not sure if you want me to go around once more to get the feeling we're ready for a vote here, but I'll go around once more time for Councillor Piper.
No further comment, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer.
Nothing further, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Nothing further, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vidal.
Nothing further, Your Worship, thank you.
Thank you. I will now call the question. Those who are opposed.
Piper, opposed.
Councillor Piper opposed. The motion passes.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next report, and this is of the financial officer regarding the statement of financial information.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the rest of Council. This evening, this report brings to you for approval the 2019 Statement of Financial Information that is required to be filed annually each year. The recommendation is that the 2019 Statement of Financial Information be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Do we have a mover and a seconder?
Piper moved.
Moved by Councillor Piper, seconded by
Palmer,
Councillor
second.
Vidal.
Councillor Palmer, seconded. I would now have any questions for the financial officer. We'll start with Councillor Vidal.
Nothing, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper.
Yes, thank you. I've got a couple of quickest questions. I noticed that Timbro Contracting, their figures is 934,000. Yet the two jobs they tendered for only comes to 844. Is there any other additional cost on this? Like I did ask the CO earlier on. They were still removing the dead water from the wastewater station.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to the rest of Council. Timbro did do one of the large projects this year, which was the Lift Station 3 and drainage that was around that same time. In addition, they do provide emergency repairs to the village at times, emergency pumping when required, and they do, for 2019, they did provide the sludge removal at the wastewater treatment plant.
Right, and what would the cost of that have been? Any idea off the top of your head, just a ballpark figure?
For the sludge at the wastewater treatment plant, it was approximately in the region of $22,000 during 2019.
Right, thank you. It's just that adding all these bits up for the Timbro and the buying of the generator, these hydro and that, the project was round about now $60,000 overspent on a figure that we was told would not be more than $1,050,000. It's a bit disappointing. But the other quick question I've got.
Can I ask Ms. Jones if she'd like to verify that?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Worship, through you to the rest of Council, I'm not aware that the project went over its total budget at all. So I could bring something forward to the members of Council with the itemised, because I'm not aware that the project did go over its budget.
If you've got things, yeah. And the last question I've got really is Harrison Tourism Society. Their figures, 872,000. That's not paid wholly by us, is it?
Your Worship, through you to the rest of Council, Tourism Harrison Society receives MRDT money and it comes from the province. It must come through the village to them, but it's money from the 3% hotel tax, and that is what makes up the bulk of this money.
Yeah, it's only that I was just looking through some back figures, and that the money paid to them has gone up since 2016 to 2019 by 369,000. It just seemed a rather excessive amount to me, but we'll leave it for there.
Can I just ask the financial officer, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the increase of the MRDT come in to make that difference up?
Yes, Your Worship, that's correct. The original MRDT was 2% for the hotel tax and was increased by approval of Council to 3%.
Thank you very much. Council.
So that will account for the 369,000.
Yes, they received an extra 1%. Councillor Palmer?
I'm fine. I was interested in the questions that Councillor Hooper asked, so that was helpful. But I've looked through the materials and I'm fine.
Thank you, Councillor Piper.
No comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have no comments to make on that, so I'll go round one more time from Councillor Weigel.
Yes, Your Worship, this, one more question to our financial officer. It's in regards to the question that Councillor Cooper asked about funding to tourism. We, as a village, though, do provide funds for the running of the tourism centre, do we not?
Ms. Jones?
Yes, Your Worship, through you to the rest of Council, the contract is $21,000 a year for the running of the Tourist Information Centre.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. That's all, Your Worship.
I'll just, Ms. Jones can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think way back in 2006, when it was Tourism Harrison was created, that there had to be a certain amount of monies that had to come from the village towards society. Am I correct, Ms. Jones?
Your Worship, this is the CAO. I can speak to that. Yes, when we sought to reduce the funding level to Tourism Harrison, which we did some years back from 30,000 or 31,000 to 21,000, we consulted with the ministry and confirmed that we are required through the contractual obligation with the ministry to make a financial contribution. The need for the financial contribution this year in the face of closures around COVID-19 is spoken to in the letter that was received earlier in the agenda from Robert Reyers, the Executive Director of Tourism.
Thank you very much. My brain is still working. I will now call the question.
Can I say something else just quickly?
Yes, certainly.
So, I've just found my figure work, and I make it that the lift station come to 1,131,555.58. If we take off 20-odd thousand or 30,000 or even 50,000 for the maintenance or the emergency work that Timbro do, we're still over budget. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, but I think as the financial officer has already mentioned, she can bring that back to her knowledge. We are not over budget on that, but she will look into that. Thank you. I will now call the question. On the recommendation, those opposed?
Opposed? Ray Hooper.
Opposed, Councillor Hooper. The motion passes. Thank you. Next
Okay.
order of business, please.
Thank you, Worship. We'll move on to the next report of the Chief Administrative Officer, and this is regarding council meeting location during COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
Yes, Your Worship, through you. This is something that came up in the early days of the pandemic when we were considering our options. Councillor Palmer had suggested that we move to Memorial Hall because it's a larger venue and we might be able to accommodate the public there. At that time, staff didn't see that that was a viable option because of the technical improvements that we would have to make to accommodate this. But as the pandemic has carried on, and we see that this is more, the need for social and physical distancing is more of a long-term issue, we really have revisited that issue. And we note that the council procedure bylaw does make provisions for council meetings to be held at any venue within municipal boundaries. So we've taken another look at Memorial Hall, and we believe that we could move back to having open meetings of council, which is of course the most desirable way to meet. These electronic meetings are really just an emergency measure on a short-term basis. And there we could accommodate public hearings or anything else that required the public to be in attendance. However, in order for these meetings to function well, and with the understanding that we would probably be having to undertake the business of council at that location for the foreseeable future, probably into 2021, my recommendation is not just that meetings of council be relocated from this point forth to Memorial Hall until such a need as physical distancing related to COVID-19 is no longer deemed necessary, but also that there be an expenditure authorized to be funded from surplus for the installation of audio visual improvements to Memorial Hall and to facilitate the holding of public meetings. Before anybody contemplates putting those recommendations on the council table for consideration, I would like you to consider raising that budget to $30,000. The community services manager has obtained a quick estimate on what it would take to have a proper projector screen and amplification system, and it's closer to $30,000. So if there is a mover and seconder for this set of recommendations, I would appreciate it if that budget item was increased. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have, hello?
Palmer moved 30,000.
Moved by Councillor Palmer, seconded by
Councillor Vital.
Seconded by Councillor Vital. We now have discussion, starting with Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Your Worship. Unfortunately, I do hear staff's needs, but I honestly think that none of us know what the future is bringing us, so I think that we should perhaps find other options for our public to view us and participate in meetings. I don't know of any other council, so I can stand to be corrected, that are meeting face-to-face in this current environment. So I think it would, I understand that the funds are coming from reserve, but I just don't think it's a wise expenditure. I think there's other ways that we can solve the issue of meeting over the phone, and I think that would be something for staff to look into. That's all I have to say for right now.
Hello? Councillor Piper?
Yes? Did you hear any of that?
Yes, I did. I've got it all. Thank you. I'm just waiting for you to finish.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm finished, but I may want to say some more. Give me a minute.
So, just to help you in your deliberations, the District of Kent are holding live meetings. Because they have that
With
large,
the public in their chamber?
yeah, downstairs they have that large room, which you know the one we've all been there. Yeah, they do have. They actually had a public hearing last week there as well.
Yeah, and just on that, the province has now issued a ministerial order that allows local governments to hold hearings electronically. So that could be an option for us as well. I just don't know who is going to feel comfortable being in, even if we try to social distance in that room, I just don't know who is going to be comfortable
Yes, Your Worship. Truly, the motivation is to provide for spacious meeting area that would accommodate physical distancing during this pandemic, or maybe going forward and for a time period that we really can't define. But yes, I was remiss in not pointing out that these improvements would make the hall, when people return to having meetings, a more attractive meeting venue, in that we're often asked when people are looking for a venue whether the hall has audiovisual equipment such as a projector and screen and that sort of thing. So there is that side benefit. It's not, it's an investment in the hall as well. And I might just speak to the ministerial order that speaks to public hearings. Ministerial order, I think 139 or something, just replaced the previous one on electronic meetings and public hearings, and it took it to May 14th. So they're just renewing those ministerial orders on an as-needed basis while we make provisions for handling this type of business going forward.
Yeah, I'm having the same problem as well. Madeline, we're having a problem hearing you.
Your Worship, I've been using my microphone. Is it better when I speak without...
That's better. We're better now.
Oh, I do apologize. I've been using the microphone system, and I can speak loudly from my end of the table. So I was just confirming that we do get inquiries from time to time about the audiovisual equipment available at Memorial Hall from potential renters. So if we ever do return to life where people gather and have meetings, these improvements to Memorial Hall would not be wasted. They would be an investment in the hall. But truly the motivation to spend this money is to facilitate the business of council in a live venue if it's supported by council.
Was that better, Councillor Piper?
Yes, much better. Thank you so much.
Oh, good, good. Councillor Palmer.
Well, first off, obviously I want to speak in favor of the motion. I think that although it's pleasant to be at my own home, I'm sitting in a place where I've got my dog beside me and the daughter beside me. I think it's a lot easier to be in a joint chambers. I guess I miss all of you. Perhaps that's the problem. But so I don't see this as a good situation. And I also have been having some problems hearing the CAO, although I just thought it was my new status as a senior had caused an immediate impact on my hearing. But I do find it awkward sometimes to hear. So I think being in the hall is good. I think we have some residents who would like to be there. And I feel quite unhappy to hear criticism of council as being less transparent when we really want to be transparent and we really want people to hear what we're doing. And I think that the live streaming is good, but I also think having people being able to come to Memorial Hall, at least during the balance of this, is good. The cost, well, of course, I'm cheap. But I really like Memorial Hall, and I really feel that any time we make an improvement to Memorial Hall, it has some long-term benefits. So having that money spent out of reserves, I find, of course, everything always costs more than I think, but I'm supportive of that. So I think it's important at these times that we be accessible, and I think Memorial Hall solves the immediate problem of being accessible, and I think that is an important issue. And if we set ourselves up with the better equipment, then there have been times when more controversial issues have come forward and we have jammed our small council chamber, and that hasn't been attractive. And since we can't now look easily to looking for new facilities, since our grant has not gone through as we discovered last meeting, then Memorial Hall, I think, provides us with the opportunity maybe even in the future when we know we're going to have a lot of visitors to be able to provide that. So I'm strongly in favor, but even and it allows us to social distance, and I would rather be at a meeting social distancing myself from people, but being able to be there live and interact in a much more
all our open house meetings there. We used to hold the finance meetings there when I first come to the village. I'm all in favour of this technology, because as we're working at the moment, it's not good for the residents whatsoever. Memorial Hall, with the new equipment in, may attract other people to want to rent it, so they can actually do seminars and the rest of it. And sometime next year, when all this is over and done with, we're going to be doing the OCP, and we need somewhere to sit down with the residents and talk to them during the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Vidal.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do support the recommendation, as has been pointed out by other council members and yourself, that I also have difficulty hearing our CAO this evening, and I remember last council meeting, my actual phone dropped, the call disconnected, although I was able to get back in quite easily. So I agree with Councillor Palmer that these are not the ideal way to run a council meeting. I do have one question for our CAO, if that's possible, Your Worship.
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. Madeline, the expenditure up to $30,000, what kind of, can you be a little bit more specific on the type of equipment? And is it sort of like equal capabilities, or does it exceed the capabilities of what we authorized to have installed in council chambers at the village office? Thank you.
Your Worship,
Madeline?
Your Worship, through you, can you hear me well?
I can hear you better now, Madeline. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize. I was using the microphone before. That didn't work well. So what is included in this quick estimate is adequate microphones for all of council with long enough cordage on it that we can be spread out more than 6 feet away from one another, including adequate amplification for the staff, and a microphone for the public for question period or for public hearings. It also includes the installation of a drop-down screen and a projector. So that would really just mimic the capabilities of our current council chamber. It does not include any filming or live streaming capability. There was a budget approved for that earlier this year. That has been spent. That has been installed here in our council chambers at the village office as per council's direction. So this would be going back to live meetings which people could attend.
Thank you. Councillor Vidal?
Thank you, Your Worship. Madeline, so this new equipment at the Memorial Hall, would it have the capabilities then of recording and then putting it on the website and on YouTube the following day, or are we just going to be allowing for open council meetings?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Vidal and the rest of council, no, this budget does not allow for additional recording equipment. That would have to be considered at a later date if this became a permanent venue for council, perhaps.
Okay, and one further question, Your Worship, for you, Your Worship. My concern too is along Councillor Piper's comment. Would we be able to ensure that disinfecting and sanitizing was done prior and after the meeting, just to make people feel a little bit more comfortable? And I'm talking like door handles and washrooms and something like that. Thank you.
Behind Madeline, you want to speak to that? Do you want me to?
Yes, no, certainly, Your Worship, I can speak to that. Yes, we've given this considerable consideration, and in addition to the regular sanitizing of touch points, there would be a clear barrier between where council is located, well spaced from one another and the staff, and where seating would be available to the public. We would not accommodate more than 50 people, even if they could be adequately spaced out. The current thinking around this is that we would set the meeting room up on the Friday. It would lay dormant, no entry, no rentals, no use of that hall until the Monday evening council meeting. So that's an additional period of fallow just to ensure that that this space is completely clean. And we would, if council goes forward with this, we'll work out a schedule with times blocked out to accommodate this kind of these kind of safety measures, and then we would work with the festival in the event that they're returning to any of their events in the foreseeable, and let them know where the options would be for them to make use of the hall. But it really is starting to look like for the duration of 2020 there won't be much activity there other than these meetings if this goes forward.
Thank you. Councillor Bible?
Nothing further, and thank you, Madeline. You've answered my questions, and so I am in support of the recommendation. Thank you, Your Worship.
We'll go around the table once more. Councillor Piper?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just a couple of comments. I don't buy into or stand behind the comments that council acts nefarious. As I stand with pride behind my ethics and strong conviction in how I represent the members of our beautiful community that elected me into this office. So if we were in a different time, perhaps it would make total sense to spend $30,000. However, in this time of unknown future and hoping that we get back to some kind of normal, the safety risks don't balance out what can be done with available technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer?
I'm fine. I mean, I guess I'll go back to the issue of the cost. I mean, if we don't spend the money is not going to be used for anything other than it'll continue to sit in that reserve for an extended period of time. So I don't think it's not that I look at it and think, wow, we're going to create $30,000 of more taxation on our residents. I look at it as dealing with the issue of transparency in a satisfactory way, and improving Memorial Hall. And I'm a huge booster of Memorial Hall and its arts possibilities. So I can think that the facility, what we're about to put in, will certainly make it more attractive for wedding receptions and all of the other things where you want to have some audio-visual possibilities you can embarrass the participants. So anyway, I'm supportive.
And Councillor Hooper?
Yeah, it's become clearer to me now after the CAO's comments. So this won't be a permanent place for council meetings. This 30,000 we want to spend will just be to cover this COVID-19 pandemic as such. What I'm trying to say is that if it was going to have some real benefit that we'd have recording there as well for the 30,000, that would be okay. I just think we need to push forward and get our own recording up in the council chambers, because this telephone thing isn't working, and people don't want to come to the council meetings all the time. What they want is to be able to view it and go over it. We have the council meetings at 7 o'clock at night. People have just come home from work, they're getting something to eat, they're putting the kids to bed. It's the wrong time. If we can record this, and I would like to know when our recording is going to be up and running to place these council meetings on YouTube, the web, anywhere, then yes, but no. Unfortunately, after the CAO meetings a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vidal.
Nothing further, Your Worship, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I've listened to all your points. You've all got very good points. So you're all coming from areas dealing with the community and how you feel about the community, how expenditures should be spent. I think the reason that was explained that this would enhance the, I call the word mobility, of the Memorial Hall for numerous events over the coming years, I think, it's up to 30,000. Hopefully, they can come under that budget. I haven't personally, I don't know how many other councillors or as the staff had several phone calls come in the last 6 months regarding live streaming or video. I've only heard of a couple in the last month or so in regards to that question. So we're not getting the public who are really banging on the door in regards to coming home. I think it's a situation where we have to do something about public hearings. I'm not sure if we have any on the hold at the moment. I think we have at least one, but for public hearings to move forward as well in an open way. And like I said, the District of Kent have made it work very well. And maybe later on, when we get into the budget deliberations at the end of the year, if council so wishes, we can then look at if it's what the cost would be if we wanted to upgrade it more as well. So that being said, I will now call the question. All those opposed?
Opposed, great.
Councillor Hooper opposed.
Piper opposed.
Piper opposed. Anybody else opposed? The motion passes. Thank you.
Could I just say one more thing, Councillor Hooper here?
I'm sorry, sir. We called the question.
No, this is nothing to do with the question. It's just a bit of...
Is it to do with the recommendation?
No, it's to do just a bit of information for yourself and the rest of the councillors.
No, is it to do with the recommendation of what I just said?
No.
Oh, thank you. Next order of business, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll move on to number 13, bylaws, and we have a report from the financial officer, and this is regarding their alternative municipal tax collection scheme bylaw.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the rest of Council. At the last Council meeting, Council asked staff to bring forward an alternative municipal tax collection scheme bylaw for the 2020 tax year, which would retain the due date of July 2nd, but move the penalty date for property taxes to October 1st, where it would be applied on October 1st, and that would be applied to all properties, not just the properties, the business class properties identified by the Ministry. This is the bylaw in front of you, and the recommendation is that alternative municipal tax collection scheme bylaw 1157/2020 receive first, second, third reading and final adoption. Thank you.
So we have a recommendation here. Do we have a mover and a seconder?
Palmer moved.
By Councillor Vidal.
Hang on. Who moved that?
Councillor Palmer.
Councillor Vidal.
Councillor Vidal, seconded by
Palmer.
Councillor Palmer. Thank you. I'll now go round for discussion with Councillor Vidal.
No discussion. I am happy with the bylaw, and I do support the recommendation. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper.
Yes, but I take it. I'm having trouble hearing what people are saying. This includes residential, does it not?
Ms. Jones?
Your Worship, through you to Council, it includes all property classes, including residential. Thank you.
Then I support the motion.
Thank I'll just ask if anybody else have any further questions? Otherwise, I'll call the recommendation. Anybody opposed to the recommendation? Nobody opposed. Recommendation carries. Next order of business, please.
Yes, Your Worship. We're going to skip number 14, questions from the public, as we're not entertaining those. And we'll move to number 15, adjournment.
Move. Jerry Palmer. Councillor Palmer, seconded by... Who seconded it?
Is there a seconder?
Councillor Piper?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I call the question. Anybody opposed? Pass. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here tonight and doing our teleconference, and all stay safe.
Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Happy birthday, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you.